Welcome my subscribers across the Southeast U.S. I'm John Feldt. Well, last week there was a little bit of rain, but as you know, that rainfall pattern has been pretty much confined to Louisiana, then across parts of Mississippi, parts of northern and western Alabama, and just brushing northwest Georgia, and then a widespread rainfall over parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. However, the further east you go and southeast, the rain really tapers off, and some areas have received no rain whatsoever. Now, parts of the area remain in a very severe drought. The drought has expanded very significantly from the core of drought in Georgia, now extending well into South Carolina and pushing into parts of North Carolina as well. Now, the Arctic Oscillation has moved into a negative phase. I'm going to be talking about what that means for parts of the Southeast U.S. and any possible change in precipitation patterns. Stay tuned to this week's edition of the Weekly Water Outlook.
Here's the rain that fell across the southeast last week. Once again, very little rain over central parts of Georgia, parts of South Carolina, northwest Florida. And then we see more enhanced rainfall out further to the west. That's been the pattern for quite some time now, where that band of rain from Louisiana across Mississippi and parts of northern Alabama has pushed up into the Ohio Valley, Tennessee and Ohio Valley, and then further to the east-west. Now, I put the dashed red line indicating where the core of most severe drought is, and what you can see is that the rain for the most part remained totally out of the area of the core of the most extreme drought. So for the percent of normal rainfall for the last 7 days, you can see widespread below normal rainfall. Even areas that received rain, it wasn't enough to really bring it too much above normal. That'd be the area in blue. And large parts of the ACF River Basin, the Savannah River Basin, remained well below normal for the entire week. Matter of fact, that dark red is only 0% of normal. So definitely another week of rainfall deficits across the region. So if we look at stream flow, this is an average of a 7-day average stream flow. We really have seen an expanding impacts of below normal stream flow. It's expanded very significantly into South Carolina over the last month, now into North Carolina and parts of the southern part of the state of Alabama as well. So the area in that maroon is currently stream flow that's much below normal in only the 10th percentile for this time of the year. So if you actually, even from across the country right now, even though we hear a lot about the core of drought in the middle part of the nation, the most widespread stream flow deficits, or the below normal stream flow, is actually over the Southeast U.S. So we can measure drought impacts in a number of ways. From a stream flow perspective, very low stream flow, the Southeast U.S. is being hit hardest, harder than any other place in the United States at this current time. Now, the U.S. Drought Monitor update this week, what we see from the entire Southeast U.S., the D3 or D4 is 9.79% compared to last week, 8.87. Now, you might say, you know, that's not a whole lot, and I guess it's not, but for this time of year, as we get into winter, to go up a percentile or 1% over the last week is actually fairly significant. The whole area now, the current reading is 75.71. Last week was 68. And that's very significant for 1 week. And I think what we're seeing is the area of drought is expanding across the Southeast U.S. Up into the Carolinas now, and also into the southern part of Alabama. And that's what we have not seen as much in November and October as we're beginning to see now. Now, if we look at soil moisture percentiles, and this is in respect to a long period of time, 1916 to 2004, how it's changed over the last week, what we see are shades of brown. Now, this is looking at the time of year, and what we're seeing is pretty much from a national perspective, the most significant decreases in soil moisture were over parts of the Southeast U.S. Of course, I think temperature would have a role in this. It's been very warm over our region. That's probably why we're seeing more significant deficits of soil moisture over the last week over the Southeast U.S. compared to areas further to the west. Now, I've been talking about the Arctic Oscillation the last couple briefings. It's been a little bit tricky here, but I think pretty much is on track. My last briefing last week, I mentioned that it would be going into effect towards the middle part of the month, early to mid, and it did dip down into negative range. You might remember I had it over in the neutral range here, and you can see it's dipped down now into a strongly negative pattern, and models are generally indicating it to remain in a neutral or a negative phase as we get into the middle part of the month. And what that's going to do with this negative phase of the Arctic Oscillation is colder air is going to be spilling south. Now, I want to mention a couple things with the Arctic Oscillation. First of all, as I said, it means typically that there's an imbalance in pressure and that cold air will be spilling south. Now, there can be a lag. It's not going to an immediate effect. So as we get into a negative phase, it might take some time. And it's not going to just be one abrupt change. It's going to be pulses of colder air. And if you look at this graph here in the bottom, or this image, what you can see here, these are temperature anomalies. And what we see here, this is a 30-day mean. This area here has been above normal, and that's going to change quite significantly as we get into this Arctic Oscillation. That's going to actually flip around. So what we see here from the big picture, we have this area of low pressure up in Canada here, and we're going to get pulses of cold air pushing around this and rotating around over the next couple weeks. Now, it doesn't appear to me to be one necessarily that's going to just bring this total amount of Arctic air down. It's going to be little bits and pieces. The other thing that's somewhat unusual with this is usually with a negative phase Arctic Oscillation, it's more the Great Lakes in the Northeast U.S. and the eastern part of the U.S. This is more the central part, right in the middle of the U.S. from the Dakotas down towards Kansas and Colorado. That's going to be where these pulses of colder air. And in fact, what we see late in this week as the jet stream dips down in the western part of the central part of the U.S., it's going to actually bulge over the eastern U.S., and that could keep temperatures actually above normal over our region and well below normal off to the west. And that's going to be a key for precipitation, is this difference in temperature. This is towards the early to mid part of the week. Some of the temperatures, reds are warmer and blues are colder. And we see here the coldest air is up here, and it extends down into the central part of the U.S. Very warm and moist air over the southeast U.S. And right here where this boundary is between the blues and the greens, that's that boundary between cold air and warmer air. And when you get that thermal boundary, that's the area most likely for precipitation. So as we look at trends and threats for the upcoming week, what we see for the southeast U.S., we once again see this boundary of more enhanced rainfall. And I don't think it's going to be all that significant rainfall, maybe in the 1/4 inch to 1.5 inch range from Louisiana across Mississippi, brushing northern parts and western parts of Alabama, then into a good part of Kentucky and Tennessee, and then up towards the northeast. As it pushes off to the east, it's going to be a lot less. Now, there will be some more rain over the southeast U.S. across parts of Georgia and the Carolinas, and that'll be welcome. Any rain we can get in that area will be welcome, but it's going to be tapering off. And if you remember my newsletter that I sent out, and I talked about this from time to time, part of this is climatologically based. There is definitely more rain in that area from a climatological perspective in that area in yellow than further east. So that's not necessarily unusual, but I do think with that thermal contrast, there will be enhanced rainfall in the area in yellow, less amounts further to the east. So this is a total amount for the 168-hour total. This goes towards about the 16th of December. And what we see here is the heaviest rain is in blue, and that's not heavy rain. That's just modest amounts of rain. So where there's rain, it's not going to necessarily be heavy, but it does look like the area that you can see a fairly abrupt cutoff here, where east of this line, not much rain at all, and then enhanced rainfall further to the west. And I think that's a pattern that we've seen for some time now, and that looks like that's going to continue as we get through through the month of December. So the takeaway points from this week's briefing, the active axis of rain remains pretty active, and that's going to be Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, drier further to the southeast, and perhaps more active again over Florida with the moisture in place over that state. And overall, I think I couldn't really call it much other than fairly quiet. There will be some precipitation. I think it'll be closer to normal in some spots, but most likely not above normal. Thank you for listening to this week's Weekly Water Outlook, and we'll be updating this again next Sunday.